Inside the Great Pyramid of Giza, an acoustics engineer climbed into a 3-ton granite sarcophagus and began singing a single note. What happened next stunned him. At one precise frequency, his entire body began vibrating, and when he later ran scientific experiments in that same chamber, sound waves began forming patterns in sand that looked like ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs. That moment launched a scientific journey into the hidden power of sound, vibration, and human biology.
We were in the Great Pyramid of Giza, and I did something a little bit naughty, Steve. I lay in the sarcophagus and made a vocal glissando. And at one particular vocal pitch, oh my goodness, the effect in my body, it felt like every cell in my body was tingling. And there was a wave of energy kind of flowing up and down my spine. It was an amazing effect.
What if sound could actually heal the body? Not metaphorically, not emotionally, but physically. What if specific frequencies could influence inflammation, stimulate the vagus nerve, and activate powerful healing mechanisms already built into our biology? Welcome to the Rhythm of Life podcast. Today's conversation explores something many of us have experienced, but few of us fully understand. Think about the last time music moved you deeply. I know I can. Maybe it calmed you, maybe it gave you chills, maybe it changed your mood almost instantly. What if those experiences weren't just emotional, but biological? And here's something fascinating. Scientists are now discovering that certain sound frequencies may help regulate chronic inflammation through the vagus nerve, which is connected to nearly every major organ in the body. In other words, sound may be able to influence your biology more directly than we ever imagined. My guest today, John Stuart Reid, has spent decades exploring that exact question. John is an acoustics engineer turned acoustic physicist and one of the pioneers of Cymatics, the science of making sound visible. His research shows how sound vibrations can organize matter into intricate geometric patterns, revealing that sound isn't just something we hear, it's something that physically shapes the world around us. His journey into this field began with that remarkable experiment inside the Great Pyramid of Giza, where resonance experiments led him to explore how sound interacts with the body and the environment. Since then, his work has explored how sound and music may influence the vagus nerve, regulate inflammation, and support the body's natural healing systems, part of a growing field sometimes referred to as frequency medicine. In this episode, we explore the science behind cymatics and visible sound, the remarkable experiments inside the Great Pyramid, how sound interacts with the vagus nerve and inflammation, and what this could mean for the future of medicine. My guest today is acoustic physicist, inventor, and cymatics pioneer John Stuart Reid. Let's dive in. John Stuart Reid, thank you so much for joining us on Rhythm of Life podcast. It's a pleasure to have you. Good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon or good morning to you, Steve. It's a great pleasure to be with you today.
Oh, thank you. And you're I don't know if you remember, but Adrian Garcia, a sound healer that lives really close to me, did a sound healing session, and so I had him on the show, and it was fascinating. And he did a sound healing session in our neighborhood that really struck me in a big way. It was out right in our parkway in a beautiful, serene environment. It's almost like a mini forest right in front of our home, and everybody laid down, and he brought out his instruments, and he did this wonderful session that was extremely calming and peaceful. And what I really noticed is that the people that were there, particularly one gentleman who was a retired firefighter, and my wife, who is kind of a type A, kind of a high-strung person, both were remarkably calm, peaceful, and joyous. And there was something that was happening, something was emanating out of them that was noticeable. and unique. And so then when I had Adrian on the show, I said, I started asking him all about this, and then I started asking him about the science about it, and he knew a little bit, but then I said, is there anybody I should talk to? And he said, well, there is this gentleman, John Stuart Reid, and apparently you have a background in physics and acoustic physics. Could you talk a little bit about your background and how you got into this type of modality of frequency or sound healing? And please correct me with the right terminology.
Right, but before we go there, I just really like to understand what form this particular sound therapy session took. I mean, was it gongs or Tibetan bowls, or what was the sound source?
Oh, yeah, there was a gong. There was also a round metallic, kind of about this big thing that he was hitting and got different tones and different notes depending on where he hit it.
Yeah,
what's that?
Hand pan.
Yes, that's exactly what he called. Thank you. Yes, a hand pan, and he had some chimes, and and a variety of different instruments. To be honest with you, I can't remember the names, but there were some wooden blocks they were holding from a string, and they were kind of clunking together. And also, he created the sacred space with something like a plant or something that went shh, and also a pan with beads on it that were moving around, which I believe is very, related to what you do in terms of seeing sound, which is what we're going to talk about today. So, but yeah, I'm very interested your background and how you get into all this.
Well, thank you, Steve, for that information. Sound baths is what you're really referring to here. They're called sound baths. And various kinds of sound bath. You were experiencing one that sounds as though it was based on the gong, which is a wonderful healing instrument for sure. And then these other wonderful instruments that were being used, the hand pan and so on, created a beautiful soundscape by the sounds of it that obviously relaxed everyone, including the firemen you're referring to and your wife.
Yes.
Highly strung wife. Well, what happens in the body, many different biological mechanisms, and we can focus on some of them today if you wish, because I really approach this subject from the scientific perspective. And the reason I do that is because I really believe that this is the future of medicine. Obviously, acute medicine, Western medicine, is fabulous for acute cases. However, Western medicine using pharmacological substances and surgery and so on have been, well, let's say just a lot less successful in treating chronic conditions. In fact, really quite poor actually in treating chronic conditions. And this is where alternative medicine and sound therapy and music medicine, as it's called, come to the fore, because those forms of, let's just say, frequency medicine as a kind of umbrella term, right? Because frequency medicine also embraces light as well as sound. And actually, as it happens, light therapy, the kind of professional word for it is photobiomodulation, or some people just call it light therapy. And that is starting to come into mainstream medicine. In fact, it's, if you go...
I just want to quickly ask John that what I read or listened to actually you on another podcast talk about this, I believe, is sound is a precursor to light. Is that accurate? Or you have to have sound to
sound
create
gives birth
light?
to light. Sound gives birth to light.
How does that?
Well, let me come back to that, because I haven't really completed my introduction that I was, giving there right now.
Oh, sure, please.
Because I just wanted to mention to everyone that frequency medicine, at least in terms of light, photobiomodulation, to give its professional term, is already taking hold in mainstream medicine, right? So if you go to hospital with some kind of a dermatological condition, you'll be, a consultant would send you there, presumably, then they won't give you a pill to fix it. They'll give you light therapy. And obviously light is, in this case, electromagnetic energy that's vibrating very, very fast, right? Depending on the light color, then the frequency obviously, relates to the light color. So they'll give you light therapy. Another term that is I'm really excited about in today's world is music medicine. Now, music medicine is not the same as music therapy. Music therapy has been around since the 1950s, I would say, and it basically concerns a therapist who's obviously credentialed and taken diplomas and so on. That person will work with a patient either in the pre or post-operative stages in a hospital environment, and will help the patient to do exactly what your gong bath did, to calm down the person. If the person is anxious because of this, whatever the treatment, whatever the surgical intervention is, then this will really help. And music therapy really helps. And it's also a form of talk therapy. So it's a bit of psychology involved as well as the music, right? But this new term, music medicine, is a new clinical term. That means it's in the lexicon of terminology within clinician, within mainstream medicine. And it's exciting because, from my perspective, because this is saying essentially that it has now been recognized in mainstream that music has recuperative powers, has regenerative powers, has many different, can catalyze many different biological mechanisms without the therapist, without the need for the therapist. Now, I'm not knocking music therapy here, by the way. Music therapy is a wonderful form of therapy, and long may it continue. But the challenge with it is that there can never be enough music therapists to go around, right? I mean, there are millions of patients all over the world now in hospitals, but only a relative handful of music therapists. So this new, discovery that music has therapeutic qualities is really exciting from my perspective, meaning that patients can use music in hospital settings without the need for the therapist, and it will still, nevertheless, help them to go into a parasympathetic nervous state, in which state they are relaxed and ready to receive whatever the hospital are going to provide. So that's a kind of
where is this being utilized? Where is this being utilized right now, John?
Music medicine. It's in very early stages now, but if you look it up online, you'll find references to it. So it's early stages, but it's starting to come into hospital settings. So it'll probably mainstream medicine is very slow to respond, to react. It'll probably take another decade before it becomes really popular in hospital settings.
So you're in the UK, just so our audience knows.
Yeah.
And so it's starting to seep into the mainstream there?
You're starting to, but not only here, also in the US and also in Spain and in other countries. It's creeping in gradually. Like I say, it's a slow process. And I learned a fact recently, which really quite shocked me, which is that there's a 17-year gap between evidence and practice in medicine. So between, like if you're a medical physicist and you've made some wonderful discovery, that's going to help a lot of people, it'll potentially be up to 2 decades virtually before that gets into mainstream. And, one of the reasons for it is because it's not just enough for a discovery to be made in medicine. It also has to be verified through trials, through clinical trials. And they take a lot of time and a lot of money. So that's why I think one of the reasons anyway that the process is so slow. But coming right back to the beginning and what you were asking about, how did I get into this?
Yes.
My background is that of an acoustics engineer first and acoustic scientist second. So the first,
Ah,
yeah, I've had two different careers, basically.
ah.
The
Are you a
first,
musician by any chance?
I am a musician as well. At
Oh,
least I
oh,
was.
okay.
I was a pretty good guitarist, actually,
Oh,
in my younger years. But
I
for some
see.
reason, I still can't even admit to myself, I put my guitar to one side and I haven't played it for years. It's a
Ah,
strange thing because I used to play hours and hours every day, and I was in a semi-professional band and so on. But anyway,
uh-huh.
I've got musical ability, put it that way. But
Okay.
my first career was that of an acoustics engineer, and so after university, I actually founded my own acoustics company, and that ran for 30 straight years. And two
Mm,
years before, and it was a successful business. It was like $1 million business in those days, which is,
mm,
I don't know, probably equivalent to 10 million today.
mm-hmm.
But about 2 years before I ended that business, because I literally sold it in the end for a very good reason, I decided I wanted to travel in Egypt with my daddy. And Dad and I we were really kind of amateur Egyptologists, and we just loved everything to do with ancient Egypt, particularly the technological aspects and the artistic aspects of their culture. So
Mm-hmm.
we had traveled in Egypt, quite a lot. On this particular occasion, just 2 years before selling the business, we were in the Great Pyramid at Giza.
Mm-hmm.
And have you been there yourself, Steve?
No, but I remember reading this about you just within the
Yeah.
last 48 hours.
Yeah, all right. Well, I'm not going to. This is a long, long story, and we don't want to take up all the time today just
Sure,
relating the
sure,
story. But I'll give you the very, kind of brief overview of it,
sure.
which is that in early 1996, my dad and I were in the Great Pyramid all alone, so no one else there, and we hadn't planned it that way. It was just because I think the way that they used to do it then. I don't know how they do it now, but they used to
Mm,
sell tickets in the morning and tickets in the afternoon.
mm-hmm.
And we bought our tickets in the morning, but we didn't use them until near lunchtime. And by the time we went in, everyone else that had bought their ticket had already been and gone. So here we were all alone, and it was really wonderful to be in that king's chamber, the main chamber of the pyramid without anyone else there. And I
Mm-hmm.
did something a little bit naughty, Steve. You probably heard this story. I lay in the sarcophagus and made a vocal glissando, which is a kind of smooth, unstepped enunciation of a vocal tone. And I
Okay.
did it in order to kind of guess at the prime resonant frequency of the sarcophagus. I should say that this granite box, this sarcophagus, is 3.7 tons roughly, and it is pink, kind of pinky colored granite from Aswan. And
Okay.
Aswan granite has quite a high quartz content. About 20% of its mass is quartz crystal. So you can imagine, that makes it very resonant. In fact, if you
Mm, mm,
strike the side of it with your fist, which you're probably not supposed to do, but it rings like a low-pitched bell. It's a beautiful sound. And
mm.
as an acoustics engineer, I was fascinated by
I
that.
bet. I
And
bet.
so anyway, I lay in the sarcophagus. My dad just stood by watching silently. And I did this vocal glissando. And at one particular vocal pitch, oh my goodness, the effect in my body. In fact, I'm getting goosebumps even now thinking about it. And I'll tell you, it's so long ago, but
Mm-hmm.
the effect was just astonishing. This particular vocal pitch, it
Mm-hmm.
felt like every cell in my body was tingling, and there was a wave of energy kind of flowing up and down my spine. It was an
Hmm.
amazing effect. And then what I did, because in those days I was an engineer and I was fascinated by the acoustics of the sarcophagus, I lifted the pitch just a little bit above this, what I've now come to call the Goldilocks pitch, and
Mm-hmm.
the effect disappeared. And then when I brought my pitch
Really?
down again below this Goldilocks pitch, the effect disappeared. So I played with that sweet spot for
Huh.
just a minute or two, and then Dad and I heard the Gafir, the guardian of the pyramid, coming up the grand gallery, making a lot of noise. He was shouting at somebody. And then, I leapt out of the sarcophagus just as he came into the chamber, and he was, gesticulating, pointing to his watch and saying a lot of Arabic that I couldn't understand. But we got the idea that our time was up. We had to leave. But what an amazing experience that was. And when we got back to the hotel, Steve, Dad and I sat and had a nice drink. We were talking about the idea that wouldn't it be wonderful if we could come back armed with acoustics instrumentation and actually measure these different effects. So cutting a very long story short, I went back again in the same year, later in 1996, this time with a lot of acoustics instrumentation. My dad didn't come on this occasion. I was just by myself. And the antiquities inspector who kindly helped. And it's a long story that I gained a lot of great data, great knowledge relating to the knowledge that the ancient Egyptians had, the acoustics knowledge. So a lot of I published an article ultimately on that research, and it showed me that the ancient Egyptians actually had quite a significant amount of acoustics knowledge. They had designed specific aspects of the chamber, of the sarcophagus, and that was very exciting to me. But one of the experiments that I couldn't conduct on that particular occasion because of lack of time was a cymatics experiment. I know you're interested in cymatics. And cymatics, for those of you who don't know, is the science of sound made visible, making sound visible. Now, some people will say to me, well, when I talk about my cymoscope instrument, which, by the way, there's an instrument behind me here, which I'll show you very briefly.
Sure.
This is the portable cymoscope you can see here.
Okay.
Beautiful instrument, and we're hoping to take that back into the Great Pyramid. I say back in, it had its gestation in the Great Pyramid actually, so we're hoping to go back with that instrument. But coming back to cymatics, this subject of making sound visible, it's not like graphically, when a lot of people say to me, well, we've always been able to make sound visible in the modern world. We use a spectrum analyzer or we use an oscilloscope, I say, no, they are graphs. That's a graph of the energy, the XY coordinates of the energy. It's not what nature creates. Nature creates, actually, in terms of audible sound, all sounds are spherical in their space form. They're not waves as such. People talk about sound waves, but they don't really exist in nature. So if you were to say someone, show me the shape of sound, or what is the shape of sound, they would say, well, it's a wave, obviously, we're taught it's wave. And then if you say to them, well, show me that wave coming out of your mouth right now, right? And it would do something like this, a wiggle in the air, right? But that's a complete nonsense. That is a complete falsehood. And it's not that person's fault. It's because of what we were taught at school and university and so on. And it's not that teachers or scientists or engineers think in those terms. They don't. But nevertheless, they use the term sound wave. And what that does, unfortunately, it misleads millions of people all over the world to think the sound is wiggling its way through the air, right? That's a complete false notion. Reality, it's a bubble. So right now, as I'm speaking, there's a bubble of acoustic energy emanating from my mouth and a little bit from my nose. Okay. And that bubble is oscillating, pulsating in and out with all the pulsations, all the rhythms of my vocal folds. And that pulsation, if you were to graph it, yes, it looks like a wave. That's the graph, the XY coordinates of the pulsations of the sound bubble. Right?
Oh, okay.
So now you've got the idea that sound is spherical, let's say all audible sounds. The reason I'm saying audible is because as the frequency rises above audibility, so like a human can only hear up to, about 17,000 hertz, something like that. This is 17,000 pulsations per second. But when the frequency rises, even higher than that, this sound bubble, which is essentially spherical, begins to flatten. So if you were to look at the sound emitting from a bird, for example, from the syrinx of a bird, the beak, the sound that's coming out of its beak from its syrinx, that sound is quite directional. So in other words, it's not a perfect sphere anymore. It's flattened quite a lot, the shape of the polar diagram, as it's called. So now it's quite narrow and fairly directional. So if you were to stand right in front of that bird, you would hear it pretty loudly, obviously. But if you were to go to the side, you hear less sound pressure level, a lower intensity, in other words, because of the shape of the sound coming out of the bird. And then if you think in terms of dolphin sounds, they are very, very high frequency sounds, and they go up to 150,000 hertz. And the shape of their sound is like a searchlight beam. It's literally like a flashlight beam, a very tight one, right? So that's how the shape of sound works. Reason I'm sharing all of that is because of the Cymatics experiment. Because now you have this idea, this concept in your mind of a spherical sound bubble that is literally now going to imprint onto a membrane. It imprints a pattern, and we call this a cymatic pattern. That's C-Y-M-A, cymatic pattern. Basically, it's a kind of, usually they're circular, they are a little bit like a mandala, ancient Indian mandala, or like a snowflake, sometimes very much resembling a snowflake, or a rose window in a cathedral. They have all these beautiful geometries in cymatic patterns. And what I wanted to do, Steve, was to use this technology, cymatic technology, to make visible the resonances in that granite box, in that sarcophagus, right? Because, the year before, in 96, I had already carried out standard acoustics tests with standard spectrum analyzers and so on. Now I wanted to do it in a kind of alternative way, making visible those resonances. But what happened was, it's a long story, and again, I'm going to keep it really short so we can talk about some of the science later. But what happened was, about 3 weeks before going out to Egypt in 97 to conduct this cymatics experiment with the sarcophagus, I injured my lower back quite badly. And I was really annoyed with myself at the time because, I paid a lot of money actually to the Egyptian authorities to get the permission to carry out these experiments. And so, I thought I was so much in pain. I thought I might have to cancel the whole mission. But in the end, I didn't, fortunately, actually. I just took probably way too many painkillers, analgesics, and gritted my teeth. And somehow I got myself into the pyramid. Other people carried the equipment in. And this experiment consisted of stretching a membrane across the open top of the sarcophagus. So this is a PVC membrane, basically a plastic membrane. And first, for those of you who've been in the King's Chamber, you'll know.
PVC, isn't that the type of material that piping, like plastic piping, is made out of as well?
Yeah, they do make piping out of it as well.
Oh, I see.
But this is a very thin version of it, thin membrane. And anyway, for those of you who've been in the pyramid, you'll know that the sarcophagus is actually quite badly damaged. The southeast corner is quite badly broken away in history. No one knows who did it. One side of the sarcophagus is slightly higher than the other. And so I had to fix all of this, to level it all off, which I did. I had taken an aluminium right angle to repair the corner. I had gaffer tape, I had styrofoam blocks and all sorts of bits and pieces that I had taken to essentially do a temporary repair to the sarcophagus to make it level, a level datum, because that's what's needed with cymatics. You're going to sprinkle on, in this case, sand was the revealing medium that I was going to sprinkle on the membrane. And if the membrane is not dead flat, then obviously it'll slide off, right? Literally. So anyway, I had to do all of that in great pain, and it was very difficult. But fortunately, the antiquities inspector helped me quite a lot. He was very kind. You could see I was in pain. Anyway, so the idea here is, instead of me lying in the sarcophagus, this time I placed a small speaker there to make sound into the sarcophagus. And then stretch a membrane across the open top of the sarcophagus with 43 little bags of sand that were hooked onto little eyelets all the way around the perimeter of this membrane to give an even tension, an even torsion across the whole surface. And then I sprinkle sand on the membrane. So this principle of cymatics, to make sound visible, yes, any sound bubble as it impinges on a membrane will create a cymatic pattern. And I mentioned earlier there about you might not think of your computer screen as a membrane, or your tabletop or your countertop, but all of these surfaces literally are imprintable by sound. Obviously, those patterns I'm talking about, those beautiful cymatic patterns, are invisible to the naked eye, right? You can't see them, but they're there nevertheless. And I liken it to the forensic science of a glass. You know, if you take a glass like this, you lift it up with your finger and thumb, and then you put it down, and then you look really, really closely at the wall of the glass, you might be lucky to see your fingerprint or your thumbprint. It is there for sure, but it's really hard to see, even when you know it's there. But if you sprinkle on some talcum powder, like magic, isn't it? You know, suddenly it brings out all of the ridges and so on of your fingers and thumb, and you can see them really clearly. Obviously, part of the forensic science protocol. It's a little bit like that with cymatics. Here you've got a sound bubble that's imprinting onto a membrane. It's invisible, completely invisible to the unaided eye. But as soon as you sprinkle on some, in this case, sand, then immediately it becomes, the imprint becomes visible. Because what's happening is the vibrations of the sound cause that membrane to slightly deform a little bit into hills and valleys, basically. And obviously, when you sprinkle on, in this case, the sand immediately goes into the valleys and away from the crests of the hills, as it were, and that forms the pattern, right? So what I did in this case was to start at a very low frequency. It was actually a little American speaker that I used called Anchor, Anchor, beautiful little speaker. But it, you know, because it was small, the best it could do in a low frequency was 50 hertz. It's still pretty good. It's pretty good actually for a small speaker. Very low frequency. Started there, and then what you do with cymatics, especially with sand or particulate matter-based cymatics, you have to look very closely at the sand, in this case sand grains, at whatever the frequency is. So you, in this case 50 hertz, you then increase the amplitude, the volume, in other words, of sound coming out of the speaker a little bit. And what you're looking for is to see any of the sand grains jumping. Now, if you don't see them jump, then you move the frequency just a little bit, maybe 50.5 hertz or 51 hertz. And then again, you're looking for the jump, if you like, of the sand grain. When you see that jump, you know that you've reached a particular resonant frequency. It's called a mode, a resonant mode, in this case, of the sarcophagus. And then you increase the volume, the amplitude of the signal, and then you will see a cymatic pattern emerge. And I did. And what happened was, though, it wasn't the kind of cymatic pattern I had expected. I expected what is very typical with cymatics, circular patterns, usually very symmetrical, usually very beautiful. If the sound is beautiful, the pattern will be beautiful. And of course, the converse is also true, Steve. If the sound is ugly, the pattern will be skewed and definitely not symmetrical, right? It will be subjectively ugly. But in this case, instead of a typical cymatic pattern, up came onto the surface of this membrane a beautiful hieroglyph, an ancient Egyptian hieroglyph, right in the middle of the sarcophagus. And it wasn't static either, by the way. It wasn't like just a static hieroglyph. It was like a snake. It was writhing, very dynamic form, and it looked exactly like the ancient Egyptian hieroglyph for the god Osiris. It's called the Djed pillar, D-J-E-D pillar. And when the when the antiquities inspector saw this, I saw it. I was shocked in that moment. And when he saw it, because he had gone away, well, not out of the chamber, but he was standing up against the north wall, filing his nails actually, and looking a bit bored at this point, having helped me to set it up. He probably thought I was a bit nuts. I don't know. But now he rushed over to where I was standing, and where he could see this hieroglyph. And he said, "How you do that? How you do that?" And I just had to shrug my shoulders. I didn't know. I didn't expect it, but I was really excited in that moment. And then he then wanted to help. You know, he'd been bored before, obviously, but now he's like, "How can I help you? What can I do?" You know, he was interested now to see what I was doing. So we worked as a little team, and I had taken a brush and a little shovel to brush the sand off, and then we would sprinkle on fresh sand, and then change the frequency a little bit, and another hieroglyph emerged, and another. So many different hieroglyphs that day emerged on the membrane. The antiquities inspector, he was so excited, and I was so excited. Obviously, you know, I mean, anyone would be under those circumstances. And then the amazing thing happened about 20 minutes into this experiment, this wonderful experiment. I suddenly realized that there was no pain in my lower back. This excruciating pain that I'd had for 3 weeks had just vanished, just gone, basically vanished. And so in the moment when this happened, Steve, I still have a very clear memory of my thought process in that moment. And it was that, I know what this is. You know, these are endorphins flowing in my bloodstream. These are natural opioids that the brain creates for you if you have a peak experience, right? Whatever it is. In this case, seeing hieroglyphs, you know, emerge surprisingly, amazingly, and that was a peak experience for me. And so I have no doubt that my bloodstream was flowing with endorphins. And endorphins have this twofold effect. One is to give you a feeling of euphoria. You feel really wonderful, right? And then the other aspect is pain mediation. When you have lots of opioids flowing in your bloodstream, then, you know, pain is largely banished. And in this case, I felt none at all, no pain, zero pain. So I couldn't focus to think any more about that in that moment because I was so focused on the experiment. But what I did think was, okay, I know the pain will come back with a vengeance when I get back to the hotel, you know, and the endorphins wear off. I'm going to get this, you know, pain back. But it never came back, Steve. That pain never returned. And so there had been a real healing that day when no amount of analgesics had been able to mediate the pain. I'd been to a physiotherapist on 2 occasions. That hadn't really helped much at all either. So I was, you know, really amazed by this effect. So that was something.
So wait, just to be clear, John. So, you know, as our audience is probably listening to, as I'm listening to it, I thought, oh, well, so you're discounting the effect. Well, not discounting, but you're largely at first thinking, oh, well, this was just endorphins and this is a temporary thing. But what you came to realize is, no, there is something that happened that was remarkable that happened to you personally that lasted over time, which I'm sure created an incredible amount of inspiration and compelled you to continue. Like, I mean, it was.
Yeah, because, well, 2 things really that were inspirational that day. You know, one, for sure, the healing of my lower back. I mean, my God, it was just an astonishing moment in my life. But then the other aspect was, you know, this Cymatics experiment had been so phenomenally successful. What it said to me, Steve, was, well, if we can make visible ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs on an ancient Egyptian sarcophagus, what else can this new science, relatively new science in those days. What else can it achieve? And so it got me really excited. And when we got, eventually when I got back to the UK, my mind started working immediately on these two aspects. One, how can I design an instrument that will make sound visible in this analog fashion? And then the other aspect, of course, was, well, I need to do some research to understand the mechanism by which, the biological mechanism by which this pain had been seemingly miraculously banished when no amount of analgesics had touched it, and neither had a physiotherapist been able to help. And so that was the journey that I began in 1997. It took 2 years, first of all, to wind up my business. Selling any business, especially a reasonable size one, is quite a task. So that was 2 years. And so by 1999, I had sold the business to another operator, and then I began the process of changing my career path to that of scientist. Now, as a young man, when my parents asked me when I was still at school, actually, they said, what career would you want to take, Johnny? And I said, I really want to be a scientist. And it was my dad who actually convinced me that the best kind of grounding to be a scientist was to be that of an engineer. And some people listening to this, watching this now, might think that's a strange piece of advice, piece of wisdom, but it turned out to be great wisdom, because I did train to be an acoustics engineer, and then I founded my own business, which, like I said, it ran straight 30 years. But what it did, when I transitioned into science, into becoming a scientist, it provided a wonderful background of knowledge that most scientists just don't have, because they don't train as an engineer. Most scientists go straight into science. So I've got a huge leg up, a big advantage, I believe. And in fact, I know for sure, because I can now see kind of an overview of whatever it is I'm studying from different perspectives. I see it from the engineering perspective, but I also see it from a scientific perspective. And that is a really big help. And it's basically how the Cymoscope instrument came into being. I couldn't have done that without my engineering background in acoustics, right? But also, now that I am in science, it's helped me enormously with various aspects of discovery, which we can get into if you wish. Biological mechanisms that underpin, for example, the healing of my lower back, all those years ago.
Well, what's really stunning is that you had this incredible experience where it actually was the catalyst to transform your personal and professional life to follow something that you couldn't ignore. Was there any other research at the time along these lines with what you had discovered and experienced firsthand, like prior to you going to the Great Pyramid and having this remarkable experience?
In terms of cymatics, yes, because actually I had been inspired by Dr. Hans Jenny, who was a Swiss medical doctor, actually.
Okay.
He was also an artist, by the way. He painted some beautiful canvases, but his passion, it seems, was to understand vibration and sound. Vibration, by the way, and sound, it's the same thing essentially, excepting that we use the term vibration when the sound is below audibility in terms of frequency. So the lowest frequency that a human can hear is 16 hertz. But then if you go below that down to 15, 14, whatever, that's then classed as vibration. So you feel it, but you can't hear it, right? So anything above that, up to 17,000, is what we would, as humans, think of, talk of as sound, right? Hans Jenny had experimented with sound and vibration, and he was the guy who coined this word, cymatics, but he didn't. It seems that he didn't know about one of my other scientific heroes, who is Michael Faraday. Now, Mr. Michael Faraday, he was a very famous scientist in his day, one of the most famous scientists in the world. He, for example, he invented the electric motor. Just to give you an idea, of some of his accomplishments. But Michael Faraday also had experimented with what he called crispations. So he didn't use the word cymatics. He coined this word crispations, strange word, and but he didn't. Very unusually for Michael Faraday, he didn't discover any applications for this technology, which was very strange because he was very much an applications man, as I am. And anyway, so Yenny didn't know about Faraday, presumably. I don't know for sure, but I don't think he did. But he certainly did some really great research himself in cymatics. 2 beautiful books that he published. Not a lot of science in them, but full of beautiful imagery. I mean, really. And that's what inspired me, Steve, to go into the Great Pyramid. But in terms of sound, in terms of mainstream medicine or the effects of sound on biological material, in those days, talking now about, like the year 2000, which is really when I first started delving into science, there was very, very little available. There were some people, and I'm going to refer to now my now dear friend Jonathan Goldman, who was, still is, sound healer. They use this term, sound healing. He was certainly, he had already begun his career way back then, and it's still going today. But I need to say also at this point, Steve, that I don't like this term sound healing. The reason I don't like it is because it's giving an inference, it's inferring that sound is actually doing the healing. The reality of your biology, of your physiology, of your body, is that only your body can heal itself. There is nothing that you can do to your body. There's no substance that you can ingest that actually does anything in terms of healing. The mechanisms in your body are already there. They're innate, right? And they've been there for millions and millions of years. It took evolution to create these mechanisms. What we have to do in science and in medicine to support the body is to provide ways to catalyze what are already there in terms of mechanisms. And that's why I don't like the term sound healing. What I prefer is sound therapy. You might think this is kind of being very picky, but the reason I'm not happy about this term sound healing is because my path now, I feel, having been given this gift of healing in the Great Pyramid and now understanding the mechanism that underpins it, right, as I do, and I can describe it for you, I feel that my path is to help provide a bridge into mainstream medicine with this sound therapy, because sound therapy is currently not in use at all in mainstream. I talked earlier about music medicine. Yes, that's just starting to happen now, but not sound, not audible sound as a therapeutic medium. No. So, but also I'm sure you know that in mainstream medicine, they don't use the word healing at all. Never. So to come in to try and make a bridge with a term like sound healing that is completely anathema to mainstream, right? That's why, I just think it's inappropriate. I use the term sound therapy. So anyway, so then year 2000, I began, my journey into this direction, a new direction in life. And now, all these years later, we have the Cymoscope instrument, of course, which is now in use in universities and many different private research labs around the world, where it's helping to unravel many, many mysteries across many different scientific disciplines. And then in addition to that, I've also conducted a lot of research into the biological mechanisms that underpin, this sound's ability to catalyze, to stimulate the body to heal naturally. And it's a fabulous subject. And 2 years ago, or maybe 3 years ago now, I was asked to write a chapter for a new alternative medical textbook. And I did. And that chapter contains a lot of the information that I had researched, all very beautifully referenced and, so very, very scientific. And that's available, by the way, for free from our website. So if you go to cymoscope.com, if you go to the breaking news tab on that website, you'll find, I think it'll probably be the third story now. There's a number of stories there, but one of them relates to this new medical textbook, and it's actually available as a free PDF download, the whole book, right? And obviously one chapter of that book is the chapter that I wrote on sound therapy and music medicine. So anyone that's seriously interested in the science, there's a great way to go and do your online research.
Well, for our audience, John, what type of things, I was reading up on you and listening to the podcasts with you on it recently. And, there's the potential, correct me if I'm wrong, to really provide a lot of insight into people's conditions that even possibly before symptoms arise. Could you go into that a little bit? And because our audience listening, they're probably thinking, this is amazing. How can this help me specifically, practically? Could it help with cancer? Could it help with inflammation and things of that nature?
Absolutely. I'd be very happy to. One of the most exciting aspects of sound therapy from my perspective is vagus nerve stimulation. So because of its potential to reverse chronic inflammation, I talked earlier about how wonderful mainstream medicine is for dealing with acute conditions, whether that be, a broken bone or excising a tumor from your body or, whatever it is. Mainstream is fabulous for anything that's an acute condition. But when it comes to the chronic conditions, really, there's not much in their toolbox, the metaphoric toolbox to help you. And so you're pretty much on your own when it comes to chronic conditions. However, medical physics researchers have made this amazing discovery that when the vagus nerve system in your body is optimally stimulated, and I've got to stress this word optimally, then it can reverse chronic inflammation very easily, actually. So
really, okay.
Yes.
And
so
for for our audience, inflammation is at the root of a lot of chronic conditions. Go on, please.
It is. Inflammation, by the way, is an essential element of healing in the body. So don't knock all inflammation,
Okay.
Acute inflammation is very much part of the body's natural healing process.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
But when it comes to, let me just quieten this. But when it comes to chronic inflammation, it's a very bad thing in the body. And in fact, if you don't deal with it, it is a precursor to cancers. So if you have chronic inflammation in your body and you're not dealing with it, you're not doing something to to resolve that issue, eventually it will result almost certainly in you getting cancer of some form or other. So it's a very, very important aspect that I'm going to be sharing right now. Let me tell you a little bit about the vagus nerve, first of all. And by the way, when you were all enjoying that gong bath the other day, your vagus nerve was definitely getting a workout. Maybe not optimally, because there's certain specific frequencies are needed for optimal stimulation. But, it's a sliding scale. It doesn't mean if you're immersed in a beautiful soundscape, your vagus nerve system will receive a certain amount of sonic energy that will be helping it for sure, but maybe not quite optimally. So let me get into all of that. So when the vagus nerve, it's the longest nerve in the body. We shouldn't say nerve, it's nerves, plural, because there are two of them. And when they leave the brain stem, the first place they branch off to via the auricular branch is the pinna of your ears, your outer ears, basically. And I like to think of the outer ears as kind of like mini parabolic dishes, you know, because they are literally absorbing sound from the environment. Now, before research into the vagus nerve, I wouldn't have even known this a long, long time ago. I wouldn't have known what I'm about to share, but I know it now, and that's why it's important to share it. That the reason for your parabolic dishes here, your ears, your outer ears, is not just to collect sound from the environment so you can hear, which obviously is one of its primary reasons. One of the primary reasons you have these ears is to collect sound. And you know that if you put your hands behind your ears, you can hear more distant sounds, quieter sounds, because then you're collecting more sonic energy from the environment, right? But it turns out, Steve, there's another very, very important reason you have these ears. And it's so that your vagus nerve system gets a really good workout. And how that happens is because when the vagus nerve branches off, it goes straight to the pinnas of your ears. And this is why your ears are so exquisitely sensitive to the touch. If you touch your ears with your fingertips, oh my goodness, it is really very, very, you can feel that sensitivity. And the reason is because there are thousands of nerve endings, your vagus nerve endings, literally all over your ears. And particularly, by the way, on the inside of the tragus, this is this little flap of tissue here. On the inside of there is where there's a even more, more densely packed nerve endings. So why did nature arrange it this way, Steve? Why did nature take the vagus nerve straight to the pinna of the ears when this is nothing to do with hearing, right? Well, the reason is, the logical reason is because nature wants your body to be in tip-top condition. And one of the ways to achieve that is called homeostasis. One of the ways to achieve it is by sound coming in through the pinnas of your ears and going straight down into the vagus system. So completely separate system to your hearing, nothing to do with your hearing, all to do with what's termed vagal tone. So when it's like tuning up a car engine in a way, when there's enough acoustic energy coming in and going into your vagus system, it really helps all systems in your body because the vagus nerve connects with all of the major organs. So when it leaves when the vagus nerve leaves your ears, where does it go? It goes to the pharynx and the larynx. And this is very good news too, because it means when you make vocal sound, again, this is nature's way. Why did it connect? Why the vagus nerve connect to your vocal apparatus? Same reason. You make sound as a means of, communication, let's say. You could say there's the primary reason for having a voice. But the other reason is because when you make sound, you are literally creating sonic energy that, again, is going straight into the whole of the vagus system. This is why, people like my dear friend Jonathan Goldman, who's been around, like I said, for a long time as a sound healer, is using vocal sound as one of the primary methods of catalyzing or supporting healing mechanisms. So then the vagus nerve after the larynx goes straight to the lungs, to the heart, to the liver, to the kidneys, excuse me, and to the gut. In other words, all of the major organs. I better have a drink. So, coming back to these discoveries by medical physics people, They've discovered that when a body is in chronic inflammation, this causes cytokines, what are called cytokines in your bloodstream, to be at war with each other. They're literally having a battle. And there's no pharmacological substance that you can ingest that will rebalance those cytokines and stop the battle, stop the war. But they have discovered that optimal vagal stimulation can do exactly that, rebalance the cytokines, calm them down. And when that happens, the inflammation goes away. Now,
Hold on 1 second. So first of all, cytokines are they're particles or molecules that allow our cells to communicate with one another. What exactly is a cytokine?
Cytokines are small substances that are emitted by cells under certain conditions.
Okay.
So when a cell is challenged, for example,
okay,
then it will emit cytokines. These are little chemical messengers. There's two primary types of them. And they end up, like I say, having a battle, having a war with each other. And this is what chronic inflammation is. And it leads to chronic pain. So somebody who has, for example, fibromyalgia is in it's quite a disabling condition because of the pain that they're suffering. So it's not just about having chronic inflammation and no other effects. No, quite a lot of pain is suffered as well, sometimes excruciating pain. And so it's a really important discovery to have been made. And I would like to share with everyone how you can achieve optimal vagal stimulation.
Yes, please, because it's very popular on social media right now. There's these different devices, and it sounds very alluring, but right. I have a feeling you're going to set the record straight here. So please, I'm very interested to hear.
I am. Well, before we describe the actual mechanism or how to achieve it optimally, just to say that there have been some really wonderful studies, vagus nerve system studies conducted, apart from banishing of chronic inflammation. And think of the millions of people, Steve, all over the world right now suffering, and they don't need to, right? If they knew the answer that I'm just about to share.
I can't wait to hear.
Right. But then the other thing, some of the other discoveries that have been made in relation to vagal stimulation is that if you optimally stimulate your vagus nerve system, if you have cancer already and you optimally stimulate your vagus nerve system, then the prognosis will be as good as 50% better than if you didn't have it. 50%. Which is an amazing percentage concerning. So there's a paper on that, for example, many papers actually. There's another paper on showing that if your vagal system is optimally stimulated, you will slow the rate. It will slow the rate at which you age. I think we're all pretty much interested.
So and I just wanted to ask really quickly, because I remember that, getting back to just touching on membranes. I don't want to break your flow here, but cancer cells have a particular, like, their membrane or whatever's showing up there, the imprint on there is very different. It's almost like an ugly pattern versus a healthy cell. Am I on the right path here? Am I understanding?
You are, but that there is a system in your body that can that is eradicating cancer cells all the time. We all have cancer cells. Nobody's free of cancer cells, but the immune system, the T cells, the killer cells in your body are going around scavenging and basically taking out cancer cells all the time, right throughout your day and your night. But what happens in a person that has cancer, because of usually a buildup of toxic load or a buildup of chronic inflammation, then ultimately too many cancer cells are able to group together and form a nice little group, a nice little club that you can't, your T cells can't battle against, because the rate at which they're replicating is too high, and doesn't, basically the T cells can't just kind of deal with them, and so it grows faster than your body is able to deal with them, right?
I see.
However, if your T cells are given a supercharge, they can do a really good job of keeping that that tumor at bay,
Which
basically.
is what optimal
Vagal
vagus nerve
system,
stimulation. Yeah.
that is part of what vagal system does. It kind of boosts your T cell count as well.
Interesting.
One of the
Wow.
reasons for that is not just vagal stimulation, by the way. It's also what's called the neurotransmitter dopamine,
Okay.
because dopamine is created whenever you're listening to beautiful music, for example.
Oh.
Right? So coming back to this idea of music medicine, when you are, say, now listening to beautiful music through headphones in particular, you can do it through speakers, but it's far more efficient if you do it through really good quality headphones. You're going to be very, well, hopefully, if you love this music, you're going to choose the music, right? Nobody's
Right.
going to tell you what music to listen to. If they do, they're on the wrong track. No,
Oh,
you need to
okay.
choose the music that
Oh.
makes you happy, that gives you gives you joy, basically.
Oh.
And the reason you're doing that is not just for pure enjoyment. Obviously, that's a big part of it. Everybody wants to be happy.
Sure.
But
Absolutely.
also, if you are in joy, your brain and your enteric nervous system will reward you. And the reward is dopamine. Now, dopamine, when that flows in your bloodstream, it does two things primarily. It gives you, as I was saying earlier about opioids, it gives you a slight sense of euphoria. So you feel happier, basically, in yourself when you are experiencing beautiful music. Oh, by the way, it doesn't have to just be music. Anything beautiful will give you the dopamine hit, right? Anything. Even exercise, actually, even exercise gives you a certain dopamine hit. But when
Yes.
you get this reward, this dopamine reward, one of the mechanisms that you will be completely unaware of, but it's happening, is it boosts your T cell count. So there's a direct correlation between dopamine levels in your bloodstream and T cell count. So if you're happy, you're going to get rewarded by more T cells, right? That are going to go around your body and, we'll take out these cancer
Yeah.
cells. That's a part of the reward. Now come back to the vagus nerve system.
Sure.
Okay, so one of the other potentials for vagus nerve stimulation or optimal vagus nerve stimulation is diabetes type 2. And the reason for that, and there are millions and millions of people all over the world suffering with diabetes type 2. And the reason that it's been mooted that vagal stimulation may be able to reverse diabetes type 2
Really?
is because
Wow.
the vagus nerve innervates the pancreas, right? So the pancreas gets a really good stimulation when when the whole vagal system is optimally stimulated, and therefore the cells in the pancreas that create the insulin that would normally be created are given a boost, are given a stimulus. So it's been mooted. There's no firm evidence for that yet, but it's an exciting potential, I think, Steve, that
for sure.
we do some more really good studies with people that have diabetes type 2, if we were seeing reversals, that would be an amazing
Well,
result.
it would be amazing, and unfortunately, that'll probably never be covered by health insurance in this country because systems at play
Maybe not.
I mean, this is actually something that could really help people and heal people. And so, as you probably are painfully aware, that's probably, but there'll be ways to do this, which is why we're covering this on this show. So
Absolutely.
please.
Now, let me come back to an amazing discovery that I made myself. It's just over 2 years ago now, relating to vagal stimulation and how to optimally stimulate your vagus nerve system. So 2 years ago, or just over 2 years ago, I was I brought down into the lab here from our home a CD by Anders and Kachina. Now, Anders Holt, Holte, and his lovely wife Kachina Miadu, they make absolutely sublime music. And we became friends a number of years ago. And they've been here in the lab, by the way. We've worked with them in the lab as well.
Right.
But I had been reading all of this information about how what amazing results can come from optimal vagal stimulation. And the frequencies that had been identifying were extremely low, 5 hertz to 10 hertz.
Mm-hmm.
These are subaudible frequencies. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So you might say, well, why did nature arrange these really low frequencies? The answer is because if you use a spectrum analyzer and a thing called a measurement microphone out in nature, and let's say you're measuring the sound of the wind in the trees, or you're measuring the sound of a waterfall, or ocean breakers on the seashore, all of these sounds contain a huge amount of energy in the very, very low frequency band, right? You're unaware of it because you can't hear it, but it's there. And nature leveraged that energy in order to optimally stimulate the vagus nerve system. Did all of this for you, so here we are walking around not knowing this knowledge. Now we do know it, and we can now leverage this ourselves. And this is how I'm just about to describe now how you do it. So just over 2 years ago now, my dear friends Anders Holt and Kachina Miadu, they created a fabulous album called Dream of the Blue Whale. And on this album, Anders
so
has his gorgeous
Okay.
voice, Dream of the Blue Whale. He's mimicking, you could say, the sounds of those beautiful whales, right? And at the same time, Kachina, who plays keyboards, is making these beautiful, long, gorgeous chords. So this particular day, I thought, I wonder what frequencies are in Anders' voice. What's the lowest frequency? And I knew about subharmonics. These are harmonics that are submultiples of the primary note in a voice, say. And so I thought, I wonder. Anyway, I brought the CD album down into the lab here, and I played it. And as I played it, I was watching the frequencies on an analyzer, spectrum analyzer. And boy, was I was surprised, because the lowest band on the analyzer is the 12 hertz band, in this case, this particular analyzer. And it was merrily dancing up and down, right? Well, it shouldn't be, because I know for sure that when albums are mastered in the recording studio, any frequencies below 20 hertz are rolled very steeply off, because the main reason for that is because speaker systems in particular cannot handle them. And if you put a signal into a speaker that it can't handle, like a very, very low frequency, it will just cause the cone to flap about. So that's why I knew that there should be no frequencies below 20 hertz. But here was the 12 hertz band merrily dancing up and down. Right. And then there are times when Anders, if you get that album, you'll know there are times when Anders stops singing and Kachina's keyboards carry on with these beautiful long chords. And there again, with the keyboards, the 12 hertz band was dancing up and down. Right. To cut a long story short, that album was only one of many that I tested that day. Most of the albums in our collection did not show this effect, but just a small handful, Steve, did. And I've called this is a discovery, a new discovery in acoustic physics. It's called the audio heterodyne effect. Audio heterodyne. Now, heterodyning is very well known in the electronics industry, and it's used all the time for many different reasons. It's the mixing of two, in this case, electromagnetic frequencies to create some new frequency that's useful for some purpose. But it's not known in audio. Here, I made a discovery that it actually does happen under certain conditions, that when, in this case, certain albums play with certain frequencies on the album, that new frequencies are being created. And some of these new frequencies are extremely low, right? So this is why the 12 hertz band was dancing up and down. You also need to know that each frequency on the analyzer is in a 1/6 of an octave band, and the shape of the filter curve is like a bell jar. And what that means is that when you see the 12 hertz band dancing, it means that on the lower sideband, there are frequencies present down to 4 and 5 hertz, exactly where they need to be for vagal stimulation, optimal vagal stimulation.
Okay.
So this is why I got so excited this day to see this. And then I checked, as I say, a whole load of other albums. And what I've done, Steve, and I'm happy to share it with you and with your followers, I created a list, an audio heterodyne list of healing albums. So all of these albums on
Excellent.
this list create this
ask.
very low frequency, right? Very low frequencies. But the other element to this that's really important is that you must listen only through headphones, and I'm not now referring to earbuds. Earbuds cannot reach these frequencies. Earbuds will cut off at 20 hertz.
Right.
Bone conduction headphones, no, they cut off at 20 hertz.
Okay.
Bluetooth headphones, no, they cut off at 20 hertz. None of those will work.
Got to use it with a wire.
Headphone with a wire, a cord attached headphone.
Right.
And only certain headphones have this very, very low frequency.
And don't you recommend a certain type of headphone?
I do.
Yeah.
There are many makes and models. So when I say it's make and model now, don't think that I'm getting a cutback, because I'm not, or a kickback.
Okay.
I'm not. But
we're going to put a link to in the show notes to your albums and to the headphones. What are they?
Do. I'm saying Beyer Dynamic, Beyer Dynamics, a German brand, been in business a long, long time. Excellent manufacturer. Beyer Dynamic DT770 Pro, or they also have a new model at the moment, DT770 Pro X. Now, the reason these headphones have a frequency response that starts at 5 hertz, exactly where it needs to be for vagal stimulation, and goes all the way up to 35,000, so way beyond what any human can hear, right?
Okay.
And yet, for all of that amazing specification, they're not hugely expensive. You can pay $1,000 for headphones, basically, if you want to.
Right,
if you're an audiophile and you're so picky, you can spend that kind of money. But these are not. They're like just over $100 or something. You know, they're reasonably priced, and yet you get this really excellent specification. Now, when they arrive, you will find that they're fitted with a quarter-inch jack plug, like a 6 millimeter if you're into metric, quarter-inch jack plug, right? And you might think, what am I going to do with this quarter-inch jack plug? You know, none of the most amplifiers, most computers don't use that. Well, literally, it's a bit like Russian dolls, where one's inside the other. You literally unscrew the 6 millimeter or the quarter-inch jack, and inside is the little 3.5 millimeter one. That's what. Then some people can literally, depending on their computer, can plug that direct into their computer or into their stereo system, right? Or if your computer is modern and you're using a USB-C port, for example, you would need to buy a little adapter, which are readily available. So it would go USB-C to 3.5 millimeter female. So the female takes the male from the jack plug, and that connects you then to your computer device, whatever, right? So that's the headphones. Now, coming back to the models of the headphones, if you have an Apple device, so Apple iPhone, iPad, computer, iMac computer, you want the 80 ohm model, because there's 3 different ohmic values in these headphones. You got in the DT770 Pro, you've got 80 ohm for Apple devices. You've got 47, I think it is 47 ohm for all Android devices. Am I right about that? No, sorry, 32 ohm. I beg your pardon. 32 ohm for all Android devices. And then there's another model, the DT770 Pro X, which I think that's the 47 ohm one. And for 47, you can use for either Apple or Android. So that's
terrific.
The ideal one to get is the X model.
if it's still available, I don't know if it is, but that one is then kind of multi-platform, you know. So it's very important to get the correct ohmic value
Yes.
as well to suit your device. And
Yes.
then you will find when you get this list from me, this audio heterodyne list of albums, it gives a little bit of advice at the beginning about dosage. So, you know, one of the things you have to know about music is you cannot overdose on it, right? That's a wonderful aspect, one of the wonderful aspects of music.
Yes.
But also in terms of if you have an illness, some kind of illness, and you want to support yourself with support yourself with audio heterodyning, then you will need at least one full album in the morning and one full album in the evening, at least 2 albums a day, in order to be able to sufficiently stimulate your vagus nerve system. And because, you know, you can't just tickle it, you have to give it some really good welly, some good energy, you know, just like nature does. If you're out in nature, you're getting the sounds of nature all the time, right? And so it's important to have, you know, at least 2 albums a day if you do have some kind of an illness and you want to help yourself.
I mean, what keeps ringing in my mind is the phrase that Bob Marley used to talk about, positive vibrations. And I think he was onto something. I mean, for real. I mean, I'm a musician. When I play music, you know, everything you're talking about, I can relate to completely. It's not just about listening, but also playing it and experiencing it and having it wash over you. I have I've always thought that sound and music has healing power. And now I'm talking to an actual scientist who is also a musician, who's also an acoustics engineer, and has combined all of these experiences and backgrounds and information and disciplines and synthesized this information to confirm something that I've already kind of knew existed intuitively. And it's wonderful to have this explained in very specific detail. And now with this album. So what do you think about the devices, though, just as long as we're on the subject, the devices that are being put out there to, you know, put around your neck for vagus stimulation? It probably doesn't. I would imagine you wouldn't think that that was nearly as good as what you're talking about here.
No, it's very true what you're saying. You know, there are one of the aspects of your physiology. I don't want to go into too much detail now because we're running out of time. But one of the aspects of your physiology that most people just don't know about is the liquid crystal properties of human beings and indeed all animals. What this means is that when sound enters into your body, it literally creates electricity in your body. Or the opposite, if you put electricity into the body, it creates sound in the body. And this is because of the liquid crystal properties of nerves and the liquid crystal properties of the fascia material. I think, you know, it's common knowledge, I think, that crystals have this what's called piezoelectric effect. So if you take a crystal, like a quartz crystal, in your fingers, and you squash it literally in your fingers, you will be creating electricity in that crystal, right? And you can measure this. In fact, I did an experiment recently for a class that I was teaching where I had a little crystal suspended with 2 wires, you know, one on each end, went off to an oscilloscope device, and then I had a speaker right beside the crystal, so I could now play sound into the speaker, and as soon as any sound came out of that speaker, the crystal acted like a microphone, and on the oscilloscope you could see the waveform, you know, of any sound. In fact, I also then used a Tibetan bowl, and I struck a Tibetan bowl beside the crystal, and you saw the waveform, you know, immediately on the oscilloscope. So this is the effect of crystals. Well, you have your body is full of liquid crystals. All of your nerves in your body are liquid crystals, and your blood has got liquid crystal properties, and the fascia material that's connective tissue throughout your whole organism also has, you know, properties like. So what you're talking about, vagal stimulation, because you're through electricity now. When your 2 vagus nerves go down your neck, this means they're easily accessible by devices such as you're referring to here. Now, I'm not going to knock any device that gives vagal stimulation, and there are many of them on the market right now.
Mm-hmm.
There are the ones that go around your neck. There are
Yep.
others that connect to your earlobes, and they all provide some level. I don't know how much, right? And I'm not going to knock them because they all provide some level of vagal stimulation, and it happens because of the piezoelectric effect. Instead of putting sound into your ears the way nature arranged it, you're putting electricity into your vagal system that creates sound in your nerves, for example.
Oh,
That's how it
so
works.
it's almost like
However,
an indirect route, and yours
it
is a
is.
little bit more direct.
It's leveraging the piezoelectric effect.
I
Now,
see. I see.
is it optimal? I don't know. I'm not sure. But one thing I can tell you for sure, it's not as pleasant as listening to beautiful music, right? You can stimulate your vagus nerve through your earlobes or through the neck, but as a tingly sensation, personally, I'm not interested in. I want to listen to beautiful music. Thank you very much. That to me is, the secret here. Nature has told us about the pinners of the ears, how the energy comes from the wind in the trees, and there's waterfalls and whitewater rivers, and all the sounds of nature basically are collected by your pinners for this exact reason, to increase vagal tone. So that's the way nature wanted to do it, and that's the way my own discovery, accidental discovery, audio heterodyne effect. And now, all of your followers hopefully are going to learn this fact. And
Yes.
if you don't have some kind of a chronic illness, maybe you're not going to be bothered to go and buy these headphones and so on, and buy any of the albums on the list. But please, any of you watching now, if you're not specifically, you don't have an illness yourself, if you know someone that has an illness and the mainstream medicine has not been able to help, right? That's the key. If they're not able to help, that means it's chronic, a chronic condition for which there's no medical cure, right? However, think about all these medical researchers who have found this evidence, right? And now it's up to us, all of us, to help spread this knowledge into the world, to help all these millions of people who are suffering from chronic inflammation and chronic pain. So please do that if you can.
Oh, well, all the information that you've talked about will be in the show notes. And I also as we wrap it up here, I just had a couple more questions specifically about this app that you sent me called the Cymoscope that people can get. Could you talk a little bit about that? And you can actually see
Thank you.
the sound and what that could provide for folks. I started fiddling with it yesterday, and I was like, wow, this is really amazing. It's taking my voice and making all these incredible patterns. And the whole idea, I would imagine, is that seeing, like Cymatics, seeing the sound obviously matters and can help you on your journey to heal. But what can this app do for people? And you created this, right?
Yeah, I created this app with the help of two absolutely very gifted app designers in Israel. So I did the design work, but they actually did the building work. And my son James also helped a lot with this app, with all the imagery, because all of this imagery that's created originally on a laboratory Cymoscope instrument and is now available within the app. So how it works is that it has a microphone, of course, in your device, whatever it is, iPhone or whatever.
Right.
That's constantly picking up sound from the environment. It could be your voice, could be a gong, could be any kind of instrument. And what it does, in the background that you don't see, it has what's called a fast Fourier transform analyzer. What that means is it's looking for the dominant frequency at any one moment in the soundscape that's around it. And then it goes straight to its memory, and it puts on screen the cymatic pattern related to that specific frequency. And it keeps on doing it, refreshing all the time. So this is why, as you're speaking, you're making different sounds. It's changing the pattern all the time. But there are healing aspects to this. It will take me a long time to describe it, and I know we're running out of time here.
Sure.
There are healing aspects to the imagery itself. But perhaps the most exciting aspect to me of this whole app is this little the burger bar here, this little 3 bars, right? This burger bar, when you touch this, I'll come out of this mode first of all. When you touch the burger bar,
Okay.
you get a choice of articles, videos, and so on. The articles section is what I'm most excited about in this app.
Okay.
So here are a range of free articles that you can read.
It's upside down.
It's upside down. Sorry.
Okay.
The first one is the therapeutic power of vocal sound. One of the things we've been talking about today, right?
Yes.
And the beautiful thing about this aspect of the app, Steve, is that these articles, which are so informative and really wonderful ways of spreading new knowledge into the world, they're free within the app.
Oh, great.
You have to have an internet connection to read them. So they're not literally part of the app that you download. And what that means is that we can upload new articles, more articles in the future. So you make an investment of $12. That's all it is, $12 to buy the app. There's no subscription. There's nothing else to buy. That's it. You've paid for the $12. You've got the app. Then in the coming months, we're going to upload new articles. Like there's going to be an article called "The Liquid Crystal Human," which we've just been talking about, right? That's a new article that I'm writing right now. And that will be uploaded. So one day you'll wake up one morning and you're having a coffee and you're looking at the app and there's a new article, right? And it's new knowledge that will help you presumably and help many other people that you then share this knowledge with. So I'm really excited about that aspect of the app. And we could talk a lot. Maybe we come back another time, Steve.
I was just thinking that. I was just thinking that. For sure.
One of the things we haven't talked about today is how did my back get miraculously healed in the Great Pyramid? We need to come back another time.
It's amazing. I'm gonna look into these headphones immediately. We use professional headphones for media production. The classic is the Sony MDR 7506 that are always used by on set audio. The audio professionals, but I have a feeling though the headphones that you're recommending probably have a larger dynamic range of capabilities. So
not necessarily. The Sony headphones probably are going to be great. Have a look at the frequency response.
Oh, I will. I'm going to send you the link and all that. But I was also curious because there's been a lot of talk bantied about the frequency changed in terms of our music that we listen to between 432 hertz and 440. Can you comment on that? Is that just something that's kind of silly, or does that make a real difference?
We need to talk about that next time because I've written 2 great articles on concert pitch. They're not in this app, but one of them is the history of concert pitch, and the other one is the scientific perspective of concert pitch.
Oh, okay.
It's a subject I know a lot about. We can talk about that next time.
Sure. But it does make a difference. I have a feeling that's where you would be going with this.
I'm going to keep that secret until next time.
Oh, very good. Okay, very good. And well, thank you very much, John. It's been a real pleasure. I feel like we just scratched the surface, to be honest with you.
We did just scratch the surface, but it's been a real pleasure for me too, Steve. Thank you so much for doing this, for sharing insights of my work today with the world. I'm very delighted that you've been able to help in this way. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
I look forward to our next conversation.
Yes, absolutely. And it's just so people can follow you and follow your work. Where can they find you on the internet?
Well, we have two websites. The research website is cymascope.com. So CYMA and then scope like microscope. Cymascope.com. And that's all research site. Nothing to buy there. But actually, if you do visit that site, you'll find that there is a link to the shop. We have a shop, and the shop is called soundmadevisible.com. All one word, soundmadevisible.com. And that's how we raise funds, basically, through selling products, all related to Cymatics, basically. And that's how we raise funds for the ongoing research. So any little, anything you buy on that, and there's an article section that you can, buy for $5 or something. But you're going to help our research simply by giving us a little bit of revenue. So please do visit soundmadevisible.com.
Absolutely.
Also, there is a Cymoscope platform on YouTube as well. Cymoscope channel, I should say. Channel, yeah.
Okay.
So look us up on, if you just put Cymoscope into the keyword in YouTube, it'll pop up. And there's some really great presentations, because I've taught a lot of lectures and quite a few great lectures on there as well.
And so all of your research is independently funded?
Yes, all independent. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. Well, for our audience, get on this. Please support this man. He's up to some wonderful things. We'll put and I'll make sure to put all of the links in the show notes. And thank you so much again for joining us, John. It was a real pleasure.
A real pleasure chatting with you today. Thank you so much, Steve. Many blessings.
Many blessings to you. Take care.
Bye-bye.
All right. Peace. Take care. Thank you for tuning into the show. Today's episode was produced by me, Steve Ordower. The technical producer and editor for this episode is Adam Shakur, and our social media manager and graphic artist is Carrie Tanner. If you enjoy this podcast, make sure to subscribe to hear more compelling episodes on Rhythm of Life, and keep an eye out for our upcoming series of how we as a society often incentivize all the wrong behavior here in the United States. We see this in the healthcare industry, the media, and in our educational systems, to name a few of the fields we will be covering. We will also be launching another podcast very soon called Ambiology that takes a look at the left-right political spectrum from a historical perspective. It will be a deep dive into this paradigm that is conventionally thought of as static, but has shifted significantly over time. Ambiology will also examine the significant role public relations, also known as propaganda, has played in shaping perspectives on critical issues in the country. If you have a moment, please leave a rating and review so more people can hear about us, and share about Rhythm of Life on social media, and like us on Facebook. Thanks for listening. I'm Steve Ordower.
This has been a Rhythm and Light production.